Hello and welcome to Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Garth Neufeld along with Eric Landrum, your podcast hosts. As the name implies, we center on conversations about teaching, but we often veer into other interesting topics, which is the stuff. This is episode number 118, where Eric had the opportunity to interview Molly Metz, professor of psychology at the University of Toronto in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. But before we get to that, at Macmillan Learning Psychology, they know content matters, but only if it truly reflects contemporary psychology and how students experience it in their lives. That's why they developed their Psychology Speaker Series, where some of today's most accomplished researcher educators explore compelling contemporary topics. Experts like Tony Schmader, co-author of the new edition of Social Psychology, The Science of Everyday Life, whose recent presentation on implicit bias was both strikingly relevant and full of ready-to-use ideas for the classroom. Macmillan Learning Psychology, because content matters, but only when it serves the needs of today's students and instructors. If you missed Tony Schmader's talk on implicit bias, please go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions to view the recording. That's macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions. Now, before you hear the interview with Molly Metz, please allow me to share some listening tips and some of my favorite moments. Well, this interview starts in the right way, and that is with an apology to Molly because, as they discuss, we lost an entire hour with Dr. Metz. In fact, I did. We were using a new technology platform, and it had a hiccup, so I don't think it's anybody's fault. It just happened. And this is a testament to who Molly is, that she would come back real soon afterwards to get another conversation and a different one with Eric. And I really enjoyed it. I was sad that we lost that. You know, it's only happened a couple times in Psych Sessions history. I don't know how many combined hours we have with the podcast, probably 200 or 300, and have only lost a couple, but it is always surprising to me how gracious people are after the fact. So, the few of you who that's happened to, our apologies. You are great sports, as Eric says a couple times in this interview, and we do appreciate it. So, thanks. Now, I'm going to try to do something different in this introduction to make up for it. So I have a couple questions. Everybody likes trivia, right? Here we go. We're going to play a game, and the podcast is going to answer it. So you can come up with your own answers here. But the game is Molly or Eric or Molly and Eric. And I'm going to ask a question, and then you guess in your head, is that Eric or is that Molly or is it both of them? Or neither, but there's no neither. Okay, here we go. Question 1. Who goes down rabbit holes of barbershop quartets on YouTube? Molly, Eric, or Molly and Eric? Question 2. Whose guilty pleasure is Outback Steakhouse and or Red Lobster? Question 3. Was it Molly or Eric or both who were in a cover band? Question number 4. Was it Molly or Eric or both of them who waited in line at midnight for more than one Harry Potter book when it was released? And finally, our 5th question. Who recorded themselves singing "What a Wonderful World" with updated lyrics for a loved one? There is so much in this episode, and I hope that was fun for you. You're going to learn who was responsible for each of those things throughout this interview. You know, they start talking about Canada. It made me really happy to talk to Molly because I'm originally from Canada. Well, she's not, but she works in Toronto. But immediately we discussed some of the special things about living in that great place, and especially in her city, in Toronto. I think she calls it a multinational city, and it is that. And so that was fun to listen to. You know, I was recently in a conversation. I've been in the United States for a long time, but I was recently in a conversation, and I know that sometimes my Canadianness comes out. It's about once a year where I'm talking to somebody, and then I say something, and then I just watch their eyes glaze over like, what did you just say? Like they are not tracking at all. This week, it was a jerry can. And I had to text folks after I said jerry can to an American friend of mine. I had to text people in my family and say, hey, is this Canadian or is this just a Neufeld thing? And yeah, I found the history on it. So anyway, jerry can. You can Google that and see what that is. All right. So Molly Metz is best known to our community as a moderator of the STP Facebook page, which she did for 3 years. And so they talk about that a lot. They talk about Molly's college and graduate school experiences, particularly as she was finding her way toward being a teacher. She's done some amazing research, and I'm so glad that Eric encourages her in this episode to do some writing about it, particularly from a teacher perspective, because it's very fascinating. But Molly is a teacher through and through, has always wanted to be a teacher. And to tell you the truth, now that I'm talking about this, my conversation with Molly is coming to mind where I think she went into a little more detail about this. But she experienced that thing in higher ed, at research institutions, in laboratories where maybe teaching isn't valued very much, and had to find her way. And thank goodness she did. She got connected with the early career psychologist group at STP, at one of the early ACTs, Annual Conference on Teaching. I realize I'm using tons of acronyms right now, but she got connected with them. It wasn't actually at ACT, but I think it was at a social hour, she said, which, by the way, ECPs at STP do very, very well. But it was relationships that brought her in. It was somebody pulling her aside and actually connecting with her, which is so good as our organization continues to grow in every way. That just a reminder to make sure that we are doing a good job of onboarding people into the community, this great community of the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. So they discuss STP a bunch, Facebook moderation. I camped with Molly in our conversation probably for like 20 minutes. They don't quite go that far, but I had a million questions like, how do you handle these various things, which they do get into? What if people are behaving badly in that 17,000 person Facebook group? And how do you manage that? So some really interesting things here. Molly Metz is just a wonderful contributor, again, to our community. So early in her career, she has done so much for it. And I agree with Eric that she is not an up-and-comer. She is a present and contributing member to this work and to this group. And again, I'm grateful for it. So Molly, thanks again for doing this a second time. And maybe we can track down some of those old recordings of you doing some of these musical things. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Anyway, you'll have to listen to the episode to hear more about that. Here they are, Molly Metz with Eric Landrum.
I am so thrilled to be here today and get a chance to chat with Molly Metz from the University of Toronto. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Eric. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here again. And let me explain what that means. Molly, and I can't decide if you can help me with the term. Is Molly being a trooper, a good sport, demonstrating grit, perseverance, resilience? Molly, to her credit, attempted to record this interview with Garth, and they had a software failure. So thank you, Molly, for doing this again.
I'm happy to be back.
Well, and as we were chatting before we got going, I don't know Molly well enough to know her sarcasm and her sincerity. So I think we're going to have fun together getting a chance to chat. two professors in the middle of a pandemic, who knows what could happen. So thank you again for taking the time. I think in one of your emails, you said that you didn't use the term, are you on break or you're on?
So what we call it is reading week. It's a 1 week break, kind of parallel to spring break, but the expectation is that this is a time to rest and get caught up on work as opposed to like a woo vacation kind of deal.
Oh, is that something that's always been built into the schedule, or is that new to the pandemic times?
As far as I know, the winter semester has always had a reading week. And my first year at U of T, we actually started having a fall reading week as well, because of course we don't get American Thanksgiving off. So both semesters now have a 1 week period about a halfway through.
But don't you get Canadian Thanksgiving off in October? See what I did there?
Very good. Technically, yes, but Canadian Thanksgiving is not as much of a thing. It's a 1 day Monday holiday. People still certainly have, traditional meals with their family, but don't travel to do so, before times. So it's way more similar to like a 4th of July cookout, hang out with your family than it is the big thing that it's become in the States.
Okay. That's interesting. So you've had to adjust to, I take it, Canadian traditions and holidays and
spelling.
You've got to add those U's in there, don't you? The British U to color and things like that. But from your website, I did do a little bit of preparation, surprisingly for me. You are a Cincinnati person, is that correct?
I am. I am a Cincinnatian, born and raised, and then went to undergrad in Ohio as well, little liberal arts school in central Ohio called Otterbein. I had never even been west of the Mississippi before I decided to go to grad school in California.
And are you, and this is probably an unfair question, but I've gone down this path, I'm sorry. And as I say, sometimes too often in a podcast, you can edit anything out that you want to. Are you enjoying a huge, major metropolitan world-class city like Toronto?
There's some definite positives, especially, in the before times. I love theater and live comedy. And so being in a major city has been incredible for the theater and comedy, big and small, that we've been able to partake. I also really love not driving very often and taking public transit and things like that. I will say that the benefits are a lot smaller since we've been trapped in the house for going on a year now. Right about now, like if we were somewhere else, we would have more than 500 square feet for 2 full-time teaching professors to negotiate and navigate meetings and recordings and such. So I don't get to enjoy as much of the benefits except for really good takeout.
So 500 square feet.
Yeah.
Wow. So obviously big city. I mean, I think of Toronto as a world-class city. I really do. I mean,
absolutely.
I put it there with a New York, with a Tokyo. I mean, that's how I think of Toronto, at least.
Well, I have too, although it's funny. I have a few colleagues here who were in New York City before moving to Toronto, and one who was in London, and they all talk about how small and clean Toronto is. But of course, coming from like Cincinnati or Santa Barbara, Toronto's massive. But it certainly is. I mean, there's a huge booming film industry here, which I didn't really realize before I moved here and started seeing my city in shows that I never would have noticed before. And it is one of the most multinational cities in the world, which has just been incredible for cuisine, but also for teaching and the students who come to U of T.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it when I've been able. I mean, I've only been there for conferences. So whether it was an APA or years and years ago, this is Society for Neuroscience. I want to say late 80s, maybe early 90s. I was there, and it was just amazing and lovely. And you're right. I'm not even a foodie like most of the people we know are foodies, but I'm not one of those. But even I just enjoyed the diversity of food and the amazing flavors that, you can't get in a Boise, Idaho. So there's that.
I can imagine. I admit when I was applying to grad schools and then later, 6 years later, applying to jobs, one of the things I would do is everywhere I was considering applying, I would Google like how far the closest Ethiopian food was as a metric of like, how far do I have to go?
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I love all kinds of food.
It's that important to you.
I wouldn't choose a job based on that, but it was certainly something that I needed to know. Go in with both eyes open.
So Molly, we don't know each other very well, and you're being a really good sport for talking to us again. What's your guilty food pleasure, since food has come up in like minute 4 of our conversation?
Well, totally fair question. I will say that I have been trying to move away from thinking about food as something to be like guilty for or earning or deserving, right? Just in like a whole, so I totally understand the question, but just as
I didn't mean it as you've worked hard all day, you give yourself this. I meant the thing that you really enjoy, but you might be embarrassed to tell others about. Like you really like a stadium hot dog with mustard and relish. I meant the thing that if you told people, really, you like that? No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like reward type.
Oh, no, it's fair. That changes the question. I would say, like, honestly, I really like Outback and Red Lobster. Like, these are chains that like foodie millennials aren't supposed to like. But like, it's good. It's cheap. Those were, when I was growing up, Red Lobster was like the celebration birthday place. Yeah. My partner and I actually have talked about this before so we met in grad school. So we were in grad school in Santa Barbara, and our friends were fancy and making their own, poke bowls and whatever. And we both had aunts who sent us Outback Steakhouse gift cards and didn't know anyone else who would, deign to go with us. And so when we were just friends, before we even started dating, we would go on like Outback Steakhouse adventures together.
Yeah, I'm not a foodie, except maybe in the barbecue realm. That's the only place I might be a little hoi polloi. But, when I get together with my STP friends at a conference, they're all scanning the restaurants that are in the area. And, my Psych friends, I mean, they would look at menus months in advance, and they would start planning what they're going to have. And if you'll have this, I'll have that, and we can share our plates. And I'm not doing any damn plate sharing. That's for damn sure. But those are my own issues. But I'm right there with you. I mean, a good chain where I can get something predictable, where I know what it's going to be. I mean, I'm impressed, and I admire someone who can like go for the Ethiopian food, and you'll try something you've never had. For me, that just scares the heck out of me.
Well, I like both. But I think they both have their place. But certainly as a, young adult Midwesterner now, in California with all these fancy people with their fancy tastes, it was something I was a little insecure about. And now I'm just like, Chili's? Sure. Let's go to Chili's. Why not?
Yeah, because you can get the riblets, and you're going to get good fries. And, if you get decent service, that's a nice night out. But, if you go to some new place, you might have a great experience or a lousy one.
Might not.
Anyway, I'm the old fuddy-duddy, so good for you. Good for you. You mentioned something to me in an email, and I promise we'll get to psychology eventually. I promise we'll get there. What did you say? Whatevs?
Whatevs.
It's what the cool kids say. I do try to do that in some of my classes sometimes, and it just cracks my students up when I try to do that. They get a kick out of it because they know I'm trying and they know how embarrassing I make it look. You can pull it off, but I cannot.
Thank you. Don't worry, my students laugh at me plenty.
You mentioned to me in an email, just to kind of as an aside, and I'm sorry, I'm using it against you. I was also in a cover band in college. Because we were talking about audio stuff. We were geeking out a little bit over a podcast. I'm sorry, but I have to ask you about that. You were in a band, a cover band in college. Please tell me about that.
I was. So just so that you know, like, I'm not cool. It was super nerdy. It actually started as like Music 454, or what the course code was. It was popular styles of music. So Otterbein, now university, has an incredible music and music education program. And a lot of people go there to be performance majors. But it was an adjunct there who ran their like music business minor program, who recognized, like, look, maybe 5% of you are going to be in like symphonies and operas, and the rest of you, if you want to make a living as a musician, you're going to be in wedding bands and, event bands and things like that. And so it's just as important that you learn popular styles of music as it is that you learn the classical. And I was a music minor, and I've always been in choir and stuff. And so I joined, and I was in it for 3 years of undergrad, and we every quarter we picked new songs, and everyone put votes in for the styles and musicians that they wanted to do, and we rotated roles. So there were a number of people who sang, obviously, and so we would take lead on some and back up on others. I also did keys. We recorded an album every year, and so I helped with the production side of that.
Wait, time out. So there are albums available with you singing on them.
Physical CDs that are not accessible on the internet, as far as I know.
Oh, wait, everything's accessible on the internet. Let's be clear about this. And on any of those albums of which you are singing on, are you a featured soloist on any of the songs?
Yes. So we all would like take lead on one or two of them.
And do you remember a song or songs where you took the lead?
Oh, I'm sure I do. So one of them, I really loved, like, emo and alternative in high school and college, and Alkaline Trio was one of my favorite bands. And so we did an Alkaline Trio song called Burn. That was my senior year. There's a line like, everyone learns faster on fire.
Oh my gosh. You've got to somehow roll that into an intro psych lecture at some point,
Work it into like motivation somehow.
Absolutely.
Avoided motivation for sure.
Your training's in social psychology, right?
Yeah.
The applications there are endless.
I haven't thought about that in a really long time. That CD was in my car until that car was totaled in like 2014. But I haven't thought of it in a really long time.
And I mean, does your mother have a copy of the CD? Do your parents have a copy of the CD?
No.
Only you and your classmates would have the only known existing copies.
Presumably, yes.
Okay.
I see the wheels turning now.
First off, I think it's awesome. And I love the 454. I'm going to use that number for something. So, and I'm going to circle back to it 30, 40 minutes from now. So you think that was a 454 moment? I mean, I like that. Yeah. I like that as a code. And I will just, I don't have singing talent, but I'll share two tidbits with you. One is my guilty pleasure is listening to barbershop quartets. There's something about barbershop quartets. And yes, what is it? BHA, barbershop, BSA, Barbershop
Singers of America.
Yeah. I've been on their website more than once, and I've listened to a lot. I click on them a lot. It's usually late at night in a YouTube wormhole that I'm in.
Oh, YouTube spirals are so good. So I told you I was always in choirs from about age 10 to 30. Consistently, I was in at least one. And one of those through high school was a women's a cappella group that I was director of my senior year. And like we went to a barbershop camp and like did barbershop competitions and stuff.
And and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but there's a really interesting history about barbershop quartets. There's a history of diversity struggles within them, because the men's groups kept out the women's groups, and then within the genders, there were struggles actually to keep white groups kept out African American groups, and it took a long time to integrate the groups together. And the website is actually from what I can tell, very open about the integration struggles across and within groups.
I'll have to flag that for my next, like I need something else to do besides whatever I need to do, internet spiral. Again,
it was a really great rabbit hole to go down and really enlightening. And, they really open up about, we made these mistakes. We were really awful to people. We should have corrected this earlier. We're now correcting it.
Nice.
It was really heartening to read. Yeah, it really was. The other thing I wanted to mention really quickly, I don't sing, but I did this. My daughter turned 30 earlier this month in February. And for her...
Congratulations on getting her that far.
Thank you. Thank you. And I found a karaoke version of... What a Wonderful World. And I made up my own lyrics, and I sang a song to her, and then I put pictures behind it and sent it to her for her birthday.
Did she just absolutely melt?
I think she did. And actually the whole idea...
What a lovely gift.
Yeah. The whole idea was actually her boyfriend's idea, which was a great idea. And I almost made it through without crying. So I don't sing very often, but it was emotional, and we both know how important music can be. So,
well, I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course. So Molly, I think a lot of our listeners probably know you from the amazing amount of, oh no, why are you giggling? Oh, I thought you were
I'm giggling because I know I'm pretty sure where you're going with this.
Well, I'm going... Yeah, two directions, really. The amazing amount of service gifts that you have given through early career psychologists and your participation and leadership there. And then this teeny tiny little thing called a Facebook group.
Yeah.
How I think it might be instructive for people to know how you initially got involved with both of those, and then what it was like to be a part of those, or what it is like to be a part of those.
So I'll start with the ECP group. I actually became aware of the ECP group pretty much at the same time I became aware of STP. It was my third year of grad school. I was already like kind of unsatisfied with stuff with the world that I was living. I hadn't really felt like I found my place. I had gone to the relationships pre-conference at SPSP a number of times, and I was kind of bored with it. And so I saw, oh, hey, there's a teaching pre-conference. I'll go to that and see what that's all about. And so I went to the teaching pre-conference. This was SPSP 2012. It was the first time that, everyone has a story. The first time I was in this community of people who had the same values and the same traditions, and they're so, open and welcoming. And you and our listeners may not know, the ECP committee tries to host social hours or happy hours at as many conferences as we're going to, in addition to ACT. And so Jordan Tracy and Sadie Leader Elder were on the ECP committee that year, and they sponsored the happy hour, and they are just some of the most welcoming people. I consider myself an introvert, and I was there alone. I didn't know anyone else. And the thought of reaching out to people I didn't know was horrifying, and they made me feel so welcome. And I left that conference with like, okay, found my people, and I want to do that. Like that thing that they did, I want to do that. So being on the ECP committee has been in my 5-year plan since 2012. I guess 7-year plan because I wasn't technically graduated yet. So now I'm in my 3rd year on the ECP committee, and I'm chair of the committee this year. And it is just absolutely one of the most fun and fulfilling service opportunities I've been a part of.
So I know I'm interrupting you answering my own question.
Go for it.
But so first off, people have a hard time with this. I'm an introvert too, so I appreciate that. What was it about the situation? And gosh, I get to ask a social psychologist this. What was it about the situation that prompted you to say, hey, I'm going to get involved, that overrode that typical introverted, I'm going to stick to myself?
It really was that feeling of belonging, that, I think that this is something that a lot of the leadership of STP has, but Jordan is especially good at, is he talks to everyone as if he genuinely wants to know the answer to his questions. Right. And some people who are the social butterflies or the organizers, they're very good at reaching out and saying hi, but then kind of flitting away to the next group and not really taking any of it in. And Jordan is just such a genuine guy. And so, I had been at this pre-conference all day, and I sat by myself. I didn't know anyone. And I loved hearing people talk about teaching as a valuable goal and something worth working hard at. I remember they did like a teaching blitz, and one of the presenters did this activity on getting students to think about gender in a different way using the game Taboo. I'm pretty sure I have been following Jess Hartnett's stats blog since she presented at that pre-conference as well. Right. And so I was just like really invigorated and inspired by the material, and so happy to be there. And the combination of, I was ready and then someone genuinely invited me in. It was right. It makes it worth it. The extra energy that goes into social interaction, especially with a whole bunch of strangers who all seem to know each other, which is one of the scariest types of social situations to be in. Sure. And it was good. Okay. And so I went to the teaching pre-conference every year after that. I started getting involved in awards committees, and that was 9 years ago or whatever.
And I'm going to let you come back to the Facebook piece in a minute, but I agree with all the credit that you're giving to Sadie and to Jordan, and the piece that you're leaving out, and I'm notorious for doing this on this podcast. You're leaving out the piece of giving credit to yourself. You're leaving out the piece of being the introvert, to tuning in, and as an introvert, taking that risk. Right?
Yeah, it's scary.
Yes, it is scary. I'm not kidding. And it's probably scary for some extroverts as well, but less scary. Mm-hmm. Because for them, they're flitting around doing the social butterfly thing. And if it doesn't work out, it's like, oh, well, you hit it, you go to bat 1,000 times, you strike out a bunch, and okay, no big deal. The introvert goes to bat 10 times, and every strikeout hurts deeply and painfully. And they go back and reflect on it a long time. And, good for you for doing that. And honestly, as I think about it, doing it so early in your career.
I mean, honestly, I think that might be part of it too. Thank you, first of all, for the compliment. I do think that was part of it too. In grad school, I've been open about this in other places as well. Like I struggled a lot. I've struggled with depression my whole life. And so obviously there are some, situational factors that can trigger those feelings in graduate training. I didn't really feel like I had a good fit in my department. I have a phenomenal advisor, one of the warmest, most compassionate social support researchers who you'll ever meet. And she's still one of the most important women in my life. So I had a phenomenal advisor, but I didn't really feel like I had a fit in the program. I knew early on that I wanted to teach, and no one had warned me not to say that in this context. And so like other faculty would flat out say, oh yeah, if you told me you were interested in teaching, I never would have accepted you. Right. That's just a casual thing to say to a 23-year-old or whatever. Cause I went straight in, and I have struggled with and written about and talked about imposter feelings through all of this. And so I do think part of that was that at that time was one of my valleys, one of my dips. I didn't know what I wanted, whether I wanted to stay. I considered leaving and had even, talked to people who had left the program to find out more about what that was like. And I was really uncertain. And so at that point, it didn't feel like I had a huge amount to lose, maybe. That it's, why not give these people a shot, give this new context a shot? I'm not sure what else I have right now. And so let's test this one out too.
Well, and I think you understand it even better than I do, but that framing, I think, makes all the difference. that you could have framed it a different way, and our early career colleagues, some of them do frame it differently, and they do decide to leave. And of course, that's fine. Whatever's best for them is best for them. But I do wonder out loud how we failed them as colleagues, how we failed them as potential mentors, how I, as an older senior person, failed them as an opportunity to be a mentor.
There are a couple pieces to that, though, right? First, I really appreciate that you're asking that, because that isn't a framework that a lot of people, senior colleagues, have. The question is, or the interpretation is, well, they obviously weren't cut out for it, right? If they left, then it's something about them. Yeah. And so better now than, so the fact that you're even thinking about that, I think, is really valuable. But then the other piece that I think we're, as a field, moving toward is that it's not necessarily a failure. I think in some cases, someone certainly could be reached or helped or supported in a way that would have led to a different outcome, but also realizing that it's totally okay to not want to stay in grad school and to change paths, which is something that I think the people considering it have a hard time with, and that's part of the struggle.
Absolutely. So let me be clear about that. I think it's, if someone wants to be successful in academia and they've done all the work and they've gained the master's or the PhD, whatever the terminal degree is, and they wanted to succeed in higher ed, and we failed, it's our failure to provide the infrastructure, and they wanted it and we failed. It's our failure. It's not their failure. And many people dip their toes in higher ed. They could be very successful and they choose not to be. And then they go into business, industry, they're entrepreneurial. It's not that they failed. It's they chose a different path with their acumen, with their skills from their doctorate training. Yeah.
Yeah. And those are two very different things that I think traditionally higher ed has been bad at both. And I've certainly seen progress culturally in the way that we talk about them, even since I started grad school. Not enough. We need more, but I've certainly seen changes in the way that we talk about it.
Oh, I thought you were going to give me the two things. I thought there was a bullet list of two things coming.
Did I have two more things?
Oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah. No, I misunderstood.
No worries.
How did you get I don't want to say roped in. How did you get looped in? How did you get cornered? No, that's not good either. How did you become involved in moderating an STP Facebook group /page that the last time I saw it had 15,000 participants?
Yeah, we're at like 17,000 now.
Holy crap.
Yeah, so I was the administrator, the big cheese for 3 years, and I was on the moderator team for 1.5 years before that. So that's when Anna Ropp was in charge. It's my understanding that, STP had social media, but she really did incredible service in formalizing them and institutionalizing it in, under membership and things like that. And as you know, she's a big bully. So
wait a second. wait. Okay, so that's the sarcasm piece, right?
Yeah, no. So she totally roped me into it. No, I was part of the group. She posted that she was looking for people to help moderate the posts. This was, let's see, I would have been maybe just out of grad school in my first job, looking for other ways to contribute meaningfully to STP, but not really knowing exactly where to go next. And I was like, well, I'm on Facebook all the time anyway, so I might as well make this a service thing. And honestly, that it was that casual at first. It was, this is a need. I could do that.
So in the heyday of it, Molly, how many hours per day or hours per week were you spending in that role?
So there's certainly a huge amount of variation with the semester flow and, when people are planning courses. There was a massive influx of new members and posts in March of 2020, as you can imagine, and everyone pivoting to a totally new way of teaching, whatever that was for their institution. I would say some weeks were pretty casual, and just the regular moderating work was, maybe an hour or two. Some
hour or two per day, or
no, a week.
Okay,
for a week. I would say some weeks were heavier, either because of the time in the semester, right? Everyone's looking for a new textbook, or because a post or a comment would happen that would spur a lot of conversation that we needed to keep an eye on and just make sure everyone is, being collegial and respectful. And there were times when it was a couple of hours of my day, making sure that I was attending to that and being aware of what was going on. Now, in addition to just the regular moderating, we also have some other tasks like behind the scenes, right? So setting up the rules. And early on, that's what Anna was doing. And so we developed, what are the posts we're going to approve? Are we going to approve members or posts or both? Is it going to be public? And so all of kind of that decision making is a behind the scenes part of it as well that could take a few hours depending on the task.
You've rotated off of that. Is that correct?
I have. I officially retired at the end of 2020.
When you look back on it, did you enjoy it?
So much.
Oh, really?
I mean, so part of it, all the way through to the end, really was that same feeling that got me into it in the first place, is that I'm on Facebook anyway, and I'd rather be engaging with these people who are really helpful and supportive and have interesting ideas than, whatever else you could be doing on the internet. Part of it was a little bit, I don't want to say self-serving, but I also have always obsessively read teaching blogs and saved resources. And so this was a way to justify that. That I'm reading these things, I follow these blogs, I bookmarking all these resources anyway. And so this way I can share them with people who will benefit.
Some people don't care for this word I'm about to use, and some people are okay with it, but it sounds like you found your tribe.
I mean, that's how I feel about STP in general.
Right. Yes.
But what's interesting about the Facebook group is that there is obviously a large number of STP members in it, but there's also a huge number of non-members.
Well, that's I got to tell you from, what is it? Long-time listener, first-time caller, from a long-time view, from an old guy like me, that's the fascinating thing going on with that, where you've got 17,000 people in a group, but the STP actual membership varies somewhere between 3,500 and 4,200 members, give or take whatever year we're in. So obviously STP has always had a tradition of giving stuff away on the website, resources, and Facebook is an amazing venue to give stuff away. And I don't even think STP is so kind of pure and I want to say innocent that I don't even think they use Facebook as a conversion technique to get new members.
No, not intentionally for sure. I mean, so we can bring that number down a little. So I know for sure there are a number of those that are spammy accounts that either aren't real people or they're real people using it for whatever purposes. There are also people who have deactivated their accounts, but they're still listed. I can say though, so we get all kinds of analytics now where you can see what the active number is. And so 17,000 around for membership, but every post still gets between 8,000 and 9,000 views. So those are people who are actively, which is still a ginormous number.
It's huge. I mean, even be conservative, even if it's just even if it's 8,000 views, to be able to reach 8,000 teachers of psychology who are active with that medium is pretty impressive.
Well, and that's one of the things that I always felt really strongly about the group, that I know not everyone agrees with me. There's always been some discussion on and off, it ebbs and flows, in whether the group should be private or not. So the way that the group is set up now is it's public. So you need to be a member to be able to post, but you don't need to be a member to be able to see the content of what's posted. And so people have rightly brought up concerns about privacy, about people giving, too many identifying details about a colleague or a student in a post. As moderators, we certainly try and address those before they ever get posted. So we'll certainly ask someone to remove some information that's not necessary if we can. But because of the extent to which people share out of the group, they share resources with their teaching teams, with their psych clubs, and you can't share out of a private group. I would be really interested. Tom would probably be the person to ask if we could look at the timing of about every 4 months, I'll post a, hey, for new members, P.S. if you think we're valuable, please go join. If we can see when I post and if that had any effect on membership.
I suspect it does.
And especially because, and I think ACT this year had last year had a huge part of that as well, because you needed to be a member to join, but that's all you needed to be, to attend the conference was to be a member, which I think was brilliant.
Yeah. And I promise we won't go on much more about this, but I wanted to ask you, as a moderator, and I know you'll be vague and I know you'll be proper. What can you give us a taste of any of the topics that you had to veto? Are there any really interesting ones that you remember that you just said yourself, not on my watch, that can't go forward? Are you kidding me?
I'll answer your question with another vague statement, which is that
that's fine.
Very rarely did people submit things that were possibly relevant that got totally vetoed. Like the things that got totally vetoed were like, here's a conference about another topic in another language that has nothing to do with teaching psychology. That would get vetoed. Here's a webcomic that I thought was really funny that has nothing to do with teaching psychology. That would get vetoed.
I'm trying to sell my textbook?
For example. If anyone was curious, you're allowed to announce a new textbook, but you're once just to share with the group without a link to purchase it. So no commercial
really? Wow.
postings. That's consistent with APA social media policy. But very rarely was there anything that could be relevant that we vetoed entirely. More often we would write back to the person and say, hey, we're happy to post this, but could you remove this from your description, or could you add a little bit more context so that people know what you're asking, things like that. The hardest things, especially over the last 4-ish years, were things related to politics and attitudes and things like that. Those were the ones that we needed to we chatted amongst ourselves in the admin mod chat and say, like, does anyone have time to keep an eye on this one right now? I don't want to just approve it and then disappear.
Oh my gosh, the admin mod chat. I bet that would be a fun thing to be able to go back and look at, huh?
Oh, lots of deciding and trying to figure out, this doesn't feel right, but we're not sure how. Can we figure this out together? It's a great team of people.
One last thing about Facebook.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I really haven't been on a lot in the past. I was on a little bit. I took a break in December of 2019. I just had to step away. In the Facebook STP group, could you swear?
Yeah.
How about profanity? So profanity wasn't.
I don't see why not.
It wasn't moderated or monitored. Okay.
No, the only thing I can think of would be if you swear at someone, but that's more about the attacking than about the language.
Sure. So Molly, I want to shift gears a little bit, and you've been a really good sport. Talk to me a little bit about. Let's go. Chronology, if you don't mind. It's always kind of fun for listeners to get to know folks. Brothers and sisters?
I have one sister, half sister, who is 14 years older than me. So we both say that we're both only children. Both only children.
Mm-hmm. And so a really common question that I ask very often when you were growing up was the question in your household, will you go to college, or was the question, which college will you go to?
Neither. The assumption was, of course, you're going to college. But I am first generation college. Neither of my parents have a degree. And so the assumption was, of course, you're going. But that's your thing to figure out, right? That's what high school counselors are for. That's
really?
It is a weird balance of the two.
But what again, not knowing any background or details, what a great choice for parents. Both parents hadn't been, yet they were, it sounds like, I don't want to say adamant, but they were set that their daughter was going.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say that it was ever an argument or a position that they had to take, because I don't remember ever not assuming that too. Yeah. I went to Montessori preschool and kindergarten. I went to second grade classrooms when I was in first grade because they didn't have a gifted program. I was that nerd. And so my life was reading and school, and I cried on the last day of school because that was terrible. Right. So I don't know that I ever imagined another possibility.
So at U of T, reading week really is reading week for you, I bet.
Yeah, I got really caught up in this book I was reading yesterday. My partner has weekly chats with his best friends from college. I love. But so I sat down to read a little bit before I did some chores, and then 200 pages later, he was done with his call. It's like a sci-fi multiverse thriller thing. I need to finish it tonight.
I really admire that because I can't read fiction. I have a hard time with it. I can read something and hang on to the variables without a problem. I cannot hang on to the names of characters in fictional stories. It's a brain malfunction or flaw.
So there's an in-between there though, right? So do you read nonfiction?
I can read nonfiction. I don't very often. I can read biographies, autobiographies, historical accounts.
I love memoirs. That's one of my favorite.
When my kids were reading Harry Potter, I tried reading Harry Potter. I really did. I wanted to enjoy it with them. I could not keep track of those characters to save my life.
Wow.
And I don't understand it. I don't know what it is. And so when all of our friends on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter are going off about the Harry Potter universe, and I'm going to teach like I'm at Hogwarts, and I'm seeing Steve Chu and Missy Beers and Jane Hallinan, and they're all. Yeah. I'm going to go to class today dressed like I'm from Gryffindor or whatever. I go, whatever, Harry Potter who? I just said that kind of crap just to get them going.
Oh, for sure. Harry Potter fans, of which I am I was 11 when the book came out and he was 11. It's a thing.
Yeah.
And it is very much an identity.
Yes.
And not just a book. And we can be insufferable.
And that's okay. I mean, I took my kids to the bookstores at midnight. We stood in line.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'd never deny my kids a book. They wanted to read. I wanted them to read. So, I had a path I was going that when I was first headed there. I've forgotten the thread. You do research. Oh no! Oh, I'm sorry. We're doing chronology.
Yeah.
Family growing up. Where did you go for undergrad? Oh, you said Otterbein.
Otterbein. It was Otterbein College then. It is now Otterbein University.
Oh, they've rebranded, have they?
Very quickly after I left, they changed what ranking or what category of higher ed institution they were. They have more master's programs now. They moved from quarters to semesters.
Small private liberal arts school?
Small private liberal arts school. Better financial aid there than it would have been to go to Ohio State.
And religious affiliated?
Technically Methodist, historically Methodist. And although they still had a good relationship with a couple Methodist churches in the region, I don't think it was officially tied to the church anymore. And
were you a psychology major there?
I was a psychology major with minors in music and women's studies.
Were you in choir in college?
Yeah, so I had a small voice scholarship, and the requirements of the voice scholarship was that you had to be in an ensemble and take private lessons, and the scholarship was just enough to cover those things. But so as a result, I was in ensembles and I took private voice all 4 years I was there.
Were you also, I'm assuming you were also in choir in high school as well?
Mm-hmm. Show choir and chamber choir and my women's a cappella group.
Choir.
Yeah, which I've learned when I moved to California is a very Midwestern thing.
So, Molly, you've been such a good sport today. Are there videos of you in show choir somewhere?
I am sure that I have friends whose parents have them on the VHS.
Right, VHS-C.
I do not have any access to these things.
Oh my gosh, but those can be digitized. We know people who can digitize those and make them available.
I am sure those are out there somewhere.
There are companies that will do that. Were you, I was going to say band geek. Did you play an instrument in band?
I did not. I played an instrument for one day in middle school. I played clarinet for one day. But the way that the extracurriculars were in middle school is they took place during study hall, and they were A, C, B, D pairs. and I was already in choir, and I also like auditioned or applied for the artistically talented program, which is like visual art. And so when I got into that, I had to give up either choir or band. And so I gave up band, and the rest is history.
When you were in college, did you join Psych?
I did. I was in Psych, and I was VP my junior year and president my senior year.
You were a Psych chapter president.
I was.
That is awesome. I guess while I'm on the topic, do you have a chapter at U of T?
We do not. We have a very active Psych Students Association. It's huge and amazing. But as far as I know, we do not have a Psych chapter. I believe one of the other campuses does, UT Scarborough, but we do not.
We should chat about that sometime. Yeah.
We should.
All right. So you're done with your bachelor's degree at Otterbein, and you go to UC Santa Barbara. Is that correct?
No break in between. I went.
Yeah, and so you needed the momentum to keep going. You didn't want to lose momentum?
I mean, I could make that attribution, but once again, I don't feel like I ever really made the decision. I fell in love with social psych my freshman year, and then research spring of my freshman year. And my mentor, who is the social psychologist in the department, was like, okay, I guess you're going to grad school. And I was like, okay, I guess I am.
Wait, how do you fall in love with social psych your freshman year of college?
So at the time, Otterbein was on quarters. So I had intro my fall quarter. And then in winter quarter, one of the 200 level courses I took was social. And I took that with Michelle Acker, who's my undergrad mentor. And then she got a special exception for me to take methods in spring quarter. Usually stats is a prereq, but I took it as a co-req. She took me to MPA. I fell in love with research. Once again, I don't feel like I ever really consciously made a decision or had to struggle about what I wanted to do. Which is why I really feel bad when undergrads ask me, how did you know what you wanted to do? I'm a terrible example. I didn't decide. I decided on psychology in middle school. I decided on grad school my freshman year. You don't have to know.
Well, and I think, so I'm smiling for a couple of reasons. First off, I think psychology decided on you.
Maybe a little bit.
I'm hearing it. And plus, do you know how rare it would be that somebody would petition to take research methods either before or concurrently with stats, and B, that a faculty member would approve that?
Yeah.
I mean,
it was all Michelle's fault.
Well, or to her credit, that she saw in you that you could handle it. And clearly the evidence is that you could and did.
I mean, certainly that was part of it. Another piece of it is that I was pretty unhappy my freshman year. I before college, I was certain I was done with Ohio. Ohio was terrible. I'm leaving. I'm never coming back. And then I ended up going to Otterbein because they offered the best financial aid, but I was really upset about it. And I had a boyfriend at the time who was at Miami University, so that's 2 hours away. And I was considering leaving, and Michelle saw a promising student who was considering leaving, and she's like, oh, no, we can't let that happen. And so she recruited me to work on this project with a couple of senior students, and ended up going to MPA, presented the poster, fell in love. And I learned later that was a very intentional intervention on Michelle's part. It is the MPA intervention. It's both a belongingness and a competence intervention for promising students who look like they're floundering, because I helped her pull it off a couple more times before I left with other younger students.
Well, even from Boise State, I took students to MPA, probably not as a purposeful intervention, but you take students up that escalator from the ground floor and you bring them into that lobby. And, most students in the US, especially from Idaho, have never been in a facility like that.
Oh yeah. It's magical.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Molly, I've almost taken up if I haven't already taken up an hour of your time, I'm close to it. Tell me a little bit about, because there's two things I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about your close relationships research. And I also wanted you to chat a little bit about how you see self-determination theory in teaching, because I read about those things on your website.
Yes. So my area of emphasis in grad school was social support from an attachment perspective. And both like the receiving of support and the benefits you get from that, but also the qualities of caregivers that can help provide the most effective support. And so it was a lot of fun and super overwhelming. One study I did in grad school was first 3 years of grad school, and it was couples from the community with cardiovascular and hormonal salivary assays and experimental and video and written note code. Like, it was all of the skills you could learn in one study, with a team of 20 RAs to help run the whole thing. It was a big thing that I still love talking about, and I love sharing about those studies with students because, of course, they eat up any couple stuff.
They do. Yeah.
Yeah. But then I also was really fortunate to be at UC Santa Barbara, which is the home of the Center for Evolutionary Psychology, led by Lita Cosmides and John Tooby, who are two of the parents of modern evolutionary psychology. And so I would also regularly attend their weekly meetings, and became really interested in an evolutionary approach to close relationships. Most of the focus has been on mating specifically, and like, that's cool. But that's only one very tiny, tiny little niche of Psych. And so I started thinking about kindness and support as serving a signaling function, as like, hey, I am interested in you, I care about you, and I'm willing to donate resources to you. Look at me, I'm a good partner or friend to invest in. And so my dissertation was on perceptions of kindness as a cue to the potential for caregiving. I have not touched that research since then.
Well, and just to hear you talk about a 3-year study, I have to tell you, this word comes into my head, and I mean it as a compliment. I really do. Have you ever been described or ever heard yourself described as an overachiever?
Maybe once or twice.
Okay. All right. Just saying. Just saying. I'm sorry.
A day.
Once or twice a day. Good.
Yes.
Good.
That's
I did a study for 3 years studying 20 variables. Yeah. Okay.
It was Nan's study. It was a grant that she had when I came in, but I was the key grad student. But the next two grad students who came in at the same time, they led the second study of that grant, which had all of those things plus virtual reality.
Yeah, but all the groundwork had already been done.
Well,
by Metz et al.
I have to say, like, even though I, did not maintain research at the same level as I did in grad school, and I was, the weirdo for wanting a teaching position after being in that type of research program, I have to say, I got to witness so much cool research, right? Because we had our own brain imaging center, and we had the Center for Evolutionary Psychology, and we had a virtual reality lab, and we had a SAGE series of talks, and they brought in everyone wants to come to Santa Barbara. And so I saw some of the most amazing speakers. And so I am fully stocked with stories about people and studies for my students. It makes me way more interesting.
Well, yes. And, you could have that career, but you wouldn't have a life. You wouldn't have, no, I'm serious. You wouldn't have, you odds are you would not be the outstanding teacher that you are.
No.
You wouldn't have think back to your mentor who had the grant. Think about to those two leaders of the evolutionary psychology unit that you were talking about. They are world-class researchers, but they are writing grants full-time. They are fulfilling grants full-time. They are inviting people full-time. They probably don't have much of a balanced life.
No, I am still working on balance, but I am very happy with being able to use all of that experience in the service of my teaching. And I was very lucky to have the mentor that I did, because as I said, she was incredibly supportive. And very early on, I said I wanted to teach. And she said, okay, then I will help you be the very best teacher you can be.
Yeah, good for you. We both know people who didn't have that kind of mentoring.
No.
And either had to find it themselves or ended up feeling really miserable because they got trapped.
Yeah.
Molly, I know I'm over my time with you. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about and didn't get a chance to, or, oh my gosh, Garth and I went on about this and Eric didn't ask me anything? Is there anything topically that you want to mention?
I don't think so. I think the only other thing was, the last question that you posed, I would like to speak to for a minute, if it's okay.
Of course,
because
yeah.
Self-determination theory is really important to me. And like my identity as a teacher, and also increasingly the research questions that I'm thinking about. So I think it's really interesting that self-determination theory, which is a meta theory of human motivation, right? It's an organismic, humanistic, massive meta theory. I had never heard of it until I was studying for my qualifying exams. And I think that's really pitiful that it is this huge, rich, not only theory, but incredibly empirically supported. It's international. It does not suffer from the same weird problems that a lot of contemporary psychology does. And I had never heard of it until my qualifying exams. And I read, DC and Ryan 2000, and I was just absolutely floored in, not that I had never thought about it this way before, but there's a vocabulary for things that I've always felt and thought about, and they wrote a theory about it, and that's really cool. And I'll say, so I went to the SDT conference a couple of years ago. They have an international conference every 3 years. And what's really unique about it is that it's a conference all about one theory, but it's a great balance between researchers and practitioners. So in addition to the researchers and the theorists, you also have the coaches and the teachers and the doctors who use SDT in their careers, and that the applied stuff is just as valuable as the theory stuff. And that was a really common experience of people who had come to the theory and heard it. And it wasn't that it was this new thing. It was feeling so validated for having now a framework and a vocabulary for understanding how people function and what motivates them. And so a lot of people know about SDT from the early work, from DC's early work on rewards undermining motivation. Right? You pay kids to color, and then once you stop paying them, they don't want to color anymore. That's, one of the earliest things. And a lot of people know it for the, intrinsic to extrinsic motivation distinction, whereas it's more useful to think about it as a continuum of autonomous regulation, and what are the things that drive us to pursue some goal. And the highest, it's not about amount of motivation, but it's about the quality. And motivational quality is maximized when people's basic needs are met, competence and relatedness. And what I think SDT has the most to add above other theories is autonomy, of understanding, of understanding the purpose of something, feeling like you have some choice and drive in how you accomplish the things you're going to accomplish. And so these things have really shaped the way that I set up my classroom, my assignments. I do also feel obligated to say that I loved SDT and framed my teaching philosophy in SDT before I married into the family.
Oh, okay.
Richard Ryan is my father-in-law.
Well, I have to say, Molly, as I'm listening to you, and I know you have no time, and I know you have no spare time, but I would love for you to write about that. I would love to, whether it's a blog or a journal article, because I think you've got a framework there that works for you that, well, I'll just say for me, I haven't thought about it in that way before. Mm-hmm. I knew of SDT, but I hadn't framed it that way before. And to hear you talk about it in that way, and then you have actually implemented it into your teaching, and then for someone to be able then to show us examples of that in their teaching with how they changed their class from this to that would be really valuable. Again, it's not like you've got nothing to do. You're not twiddling your thumbs. You're not. But, down the road, I think that could be really valuable.
Well, thank you. It is. I'm not sure, like you said, of the medium or the outlet, but it certainly shapes a lot of the choices I make. And so there are a lot of ways that I would like to share that.
Right. And it could be other ways that I am not being creative enough to come up with. It doesn't have to be, heck, you could do your own podcast for that matter. That could be a way to talk about it. Molly, I know we've gone over an hour. I just want to thank you for all your time and all your generosity. And something that I have fallen into a tradition of doing, which is, although it's not my place to do it, I do it anyway. Thank you so much for all that you are doing and all that you've already done for teachers of psychology. I'm not the official spokesperson of anything, but you have given amazingly of your gifts, and you are so early in your career, and you're not a rising superstar. You are a superstar, and it's going to be so fun to watch your career and see what you do and watch what you accomplish. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eric. That really means a lot. SDP has given me so much, and so being a part of that is all I could ask.
I get it. I get it. I started serving in certain roles to give back because SDP had been so generous to me. Thank you, Molly.
Yeah. Thank you.